Hi, hello, and welcome, or welcome back, I suppose. We're inevitably in for a little bit of a long one with this because I really found myself just falling into it. After the half disappointment of last week, there's nothing like an absolute banger to pull you out of a potential slump. So, this week we're going to be looking at Silverweed Road by Simon Crook. Spoilers ahead, and we're looking at horror, so there's probably like a little bit of nastiness ahead too. This is a retrospective anthology played as real events, looking back at the strange happenings on, as you might imagine, a street called Silverweed Road. Between each story we get small excerpts from a blog by a former detective chief inspector who's called Jim Heath. During the investigations into the weird goings on with the street, he ended up getting fired, and these are his musings on what could have been happening 5 years after everything took place. He provides the lens of what things looked like from a more regular human perspective, having no real clue what was really at play. These are interesting enough, but I wouldn't have been too upset if they were absent. I won't be touching on these too much going forward. However, one of these blog entries is our prologue, and it does give us a little bit of useful early context going in, and throughout we do get a bit of extra bit of juicy context as we fill little parts of the story out. So it's useful, but they do sort of feel there sometimes rather than necessary. In many ways, it was a nowhere street, no different to any other across the UK. A quiet cul-de-sac on the Corvid estate where the houses stopped dead at the edge of the woods. Flanks of mock Tudor semis built in the 1950s faced one another across the tarmac, each with a short gravel driveway, each with a long back garden. So let's step onto this strange little street and get some spooky, scary goodness. First up, we're going behind the doors of number 31 with the jackdaw so we can set everything up. After a stroke, Victor has become very particular about his garden. Everything has its place. Timing has to be perfect with planting, harvesting, etc. And above all, bugs, birds and other wildlife one might find are, more often than not, the enemy. However, despite his meticulousness, it hasn't been the best year for his garden. Brown rot took hold of much of what he planted. However, right in the centre is a crown jewel that made it through all the problems. Autumn treasure raspberries are beneath a zipped up cover, and they're his pride and joy. His wife Patricia loves her husband, but she is getting rather tired of the way he behaves about his garden, especially when he gets up at the crack of dawn to get a hairdryer and an extension lead so he can get rid of the frost that's encasing his treasures. After his antics are over, she looks out of the window and sees a pair of jackdaws, a male and a female, preening. She ends up making eye contact with the female, and it's clear there's a connection and understanding between the two of them. She watches, making no attempt to intervene or call to her husband, as the female, the larger of the two, unzips the casing that holds the raspberries, and the two of them are in for a feast. This is all happening, by the way, when Victor's he's done all of his incredibly noisy hair drying, and he's back in, he's going for a shower, and that's when all this jackdaw stuff has happened, because I thought I'd mention that, but I didn't. Victor responds to the aftermath of his raspberry destruction, as well as you'd imagine, and upon finding out how the animals got into his raspberries, he ends up on a mission. Finding his old hunting catapult, he takes aim and kills the smaller of the two, the male, thus setting off a series of events that will forever haunt Victor, and worse than haunting, to be fair. While in this story the jackdaw is fully centralised, she's present as an omen throughout, and I love the way Crook uses the intelligence of corvids in a mostly subtle supernatural way, and it's so fun to me. It's not unusual, to be fair. Crows, ravens, magpies, they all have their ties to magic and omens and that kind of thing, but it is cool seeing their natural intelligence working alongside the magic. And while Crook delves into different kinds of horror, there is a tone that generally carries throughout that he sets up brilliantly here. This is a very clearly British novel, not just the fact that he was fired from Kent Police, as we see. It's so clear in the way that he writes. If you know something like Hot Fuzz, then you get the vibe here. It's not as focused on comedy, though there are aspects of that, but it's so parochial and seemingly mundane, and it all just works. The first story also lets us know how visceral we're going to be getting with any of the more violent aspects. Victor gets his bald head clawed by the jackdaw and manages to blow the top of his thumb off with the catapult, barring the bit of body horror we'll come to later. It's all stuff that's uncomfortable, it's grim, but it's nothing over the top. Like, you expect to see a little bit of nastiness in horror, even if it's not a violent book, something like Mayfly. But even then, it is still going to have some level of violence within it. I think that's to be expected. But this is just a bit gross, and it's a bit, ooh. Like, he gets clawed in the head by the jackdaw twice. Once more of a graze, and the other is a part of how Victor meets his end. He ends up in a glue trap, and the jackdaw does her worst, even managing to bury him at the end, which is very fun. We don't see that, but it is very much implied. It's the kind of thing you can almost feel, and it makes your skin crawl. But if you're not into over-the-top, like blood, guts, and viscera, then this is still a good one for you. If you like horror that has a little bit of, like, nastiness in it, but you don't like that, like I say, in-your-face stuff, this still works. We also get our first sighting of the man from number 15. He is unfortunately referred to as the man from number 17, which is probably just a simple typo. I could give benefit of the doubt and say, well, it's Victor not recalling properly because the folks don't interact properly on the street, but I have a feeling it's just a simple writing error. But this man is described as a potential cult member who's gnomish and keeps lighting oil drum fires. And that becomes important when we meet him. As for the rest of the stories, I'm going to do a quick rundown from them and then give my thoughts at the end of each one, because I just wanted to give you that setup that we have. And it is a brilliant way to set everything up. Like I said, it tonally gets us in the right mood, and it is such a fun way to tell us what to expect. We then go to number 25, The Pool. A young artist named Cleo is stuck in a seemingly unending art block. She meets a new agent, Margaret Powler, who offers her the opportunity to stay at her studio in Kent, which of course is 25 Silverweed Road. The pool there compels her to swim, leaving her skin soft and supple, and she has an urge to create art in a way she never has before. But there is something else lurking at the bottom of the pool. She ends up effectively being taken by a witch, and it all becomes very clear that that was Margaret's plan from the start. I really like the slow descent of this story, and it's one of those where you kind of go, I know what kind of story she's in, so I'm reading into everything that seems off or dangerous, but to her, it's something she can write off. And it also showed us immediately that Crook is using this book as a showing off of his skill with a range of horror, because this isn't the same kind of horror as the first. It has a bit of a Bluebeard quality to it, and that folktale, fairy tale style does run through the collection, but it shows in very different ways throughout. It's very much less overt here, but it's present. There is a room that she's told she's not allowed to go into. That always makes me go, Bluebeard. I know for some people that's more likely to make them think Forbidden Fruit, Adam and Eve, but it all comes under the same kind of umbrella. But when I'm thinking of more dark topics, for me, I'm always going to go to Bluebeard. And this feels like a modern story, more so than much of the collection, I would say, apart from the experiment we will see later on. But there are those hints of that folksiness to it. I will say, he repeated her hair colour a lot in this, and it seemed like it would be far more important than it, to me, seemed like it was in the end. I'm sure I could have missed something, but it was said just like a lot, and I feel like I would have noticed it again at the end. Number 17, Caught Red-Handed. Augustus Fry is a fraudulent antiques dealer who is only in it to look legit and try to make as much money as humanly possible off people who are not expecting him to be doing that sort of thing. And he thinks he has tricked a very poor man by lowballing him for an old Anglo-Saxon ring. He ends up finding out the hard way, however, that this ring is deeply cursed, causing him deep burns, a missing nose, and blood on his hands in the form of the 2 buyers he tried to palm this ring off onto. And it's in this story where we also meet the woman from number 10 and find out there's something wrong with the flowers left at a car crash site, and they do seem to have some kind of hold on her. We see that in this story. This one was upping the ante of the feeling from the jackdaw. You wanted Victor to get some kind of comeuppance after killing the jackdaw and being a general curmudgeon, but it's really amped up with Fry, because he is kind of an irredeemable bellend. He's so greedy and rude and pompous, and I was so annoyed with him the whole time, and that ring gave him exactly what he deserved. This is also one where Crook delves into some of the nastier elements of horror. It isn't excessively gory or anything, but it does definitely go into more detail than other stories do. The descriptions of burns and his nose getting eaten off by his cat they're something else, and it is so good. He also makes really good use of the unseen, focusing on what Fry can hear while the 2 buyers are trying to get the ring. He hears the screams of their torment, followed by a deafening silence. It's clear the 2 men had about as much good intention as Fry, and it all just feels like just desserts. It's done so well. And next up, we have number 4, Cuttlefish. Dr. Erica Koto studies cuttlefish, good job, and is convinced he can learn their language. He turns his house into an isolated aquarium laboratory. One cuttlefish in particular seems to be working with him, and also seems to be growing at an alarming rate. When it bites and bores a hole into Akoto's hand, he discovers that there is far more going on than a possible infection, and his hand effectively becomes a pregnant cuttlefish. This is Crook's peek into body horror, and look, let's just get into it. Early on, we hear the car crash that becomes the centre of the next story and where the flowers were in the last one. I feel like it's interesting to just bring in where other stories fit in with the timeline. But while this one isn't 100% my favourite, this is close and an absolute standout, if nothing else. There is something overtly supernatural about every other story in some form, but this one is just really weird and more focused on like mad scientist type stuff, and Akoto isn't even the mad scientist in this story. He just seems like it. At first, when his hand started shifting in colour, I thought it was becoming a cuttlefish, because the way he tried to communicate with them and learn their language was by putting this glove on that sort of reflects and changes colour in the way that the cuttlefish do, and he moved his hand in the way that they move their like front little tentacly bits, but instead it had become impregnated, like I said, and he wanted to be one with these creatures so bad and understand them on a deep level, and frankly, becoming impregnated by one and dying to feed everyone, as all common cuttlefish mothers do, he is probably the happiest person on earth, because he does seem to love what happens to him. Not only does he get to understand cuttlefish secrets before he dies, but he literally gets to become one of them in a way because of his death. He's just overall way too excited about the whole thing, and even before the transformation starts, he made me deeply uncomfortable. Even the way the non-alpha cuttlefish end up becoming cult-like, slapping at the tank to seemingly like rile him up, and the alpha one does, the one that impregnated him, does just like agitate the piss out of him on purpose. It really freaked me out, this one. It became like a little cult, and it freaked me the fuck out. I know I was reading this entire story with a grimace on my face the entire time, because Next up, we find ourselves at number 10 with Crash Flowers. Shanta Kapoor awakes to the sound of a nasty car crash at the end of the street, with someone having slammed into a lamppost at high speed. The vision of the woman being taken into the ambulance sticks with Shanta, perhaps feeling like there's some kind of similarity between the two of them. She lays flowers at the crash site, noticing that, like her, nobody seems to be leaving flowers that actually knew the girl. They all just have the condolences, sorry, no properly written messages are in there. It is very odd. However, there are some beautiful orchids laying there that seem to lure her in. Something about them has entangled her, and we learn in the policeman's blog post afterwards that she is neither the first nor the last to fall into this pattern, and it appears to be linked to a serial killer who's supposed to be dead. And a big part of this is that to her, those orchids smell beautiful and fresh and sweet and remind her of this first kiss, first love, but to everybody else they smell disgusting, like rotten meat, because they aren't the prime target. And it was in this story where I realised the mix-up with number 15 and number 17 that happened in the first story. Again, it isn't the end of the world, but it is worth noting. It's a bit annoying, I'm not going to lie. We also meet the fella from number 16 here in a lovely pair of dartboard slippers. And it is also kind of interesting to consider that this woman's story is happening at the same time as Akoto is being impregnated by a cuttlefish, because what a world that Crook has created. And this one is more of a gentle, creeping horror than much of what came before it. It had the energy of maybe an episode of Inside Number 9 or one of Doctor Who's really good horror episodes. It has as much of a tragic element as a horror element. It isn't gross per se, but it is incredibly unsettling. I love the slow realization that things aren't right with Shanta. The way she unravels is shown so well, and I love the view into the wider world with this one. I know the police stuff didn't generally hold my interest too much, but I did really like its function with this one. Number 16, Darts with the Devil, features Terry Slater, who fumbled in the finals of a local darts tournament, and it's been haunting him ever since. He doesn't even feel able to throw the damn things in his garage anymore, never mind with any kind of accuracy. While having a bit of a sad drink at the pub, he meets a fella called Merv Vistow, and he says that he can help Terry with his problem in exchange for a trade. Terry assumes that he'll be helping fix his drains, given that's a major part of his actual job, but instead, he trades his soul for the opportunity to get his darts back. All he has to do is say Merv Vistow every time he goes to throw a dart. And he does this, eventually making it to the Invictus Cup, and gets into the final against the man he bottled it against the last time. He thinks to himself that maybe he can just go it alone, with no help from Merv, but the devil made himself clear, and the results are a nightmare. And it's this particular case that gets Jim Heath fired, the police officer, because as far as the police are concerned, he just lets Terry go from questioning for no reason, but in the story itself, we've seen that this is actually Merv's doing, and the way it all plays out at the end is so interesting, because as soon as he loses control, it's just a bloodbath. He kills both his opponent and the dodgy, MC, and a series of darts from the little box he's got, way more than can fit in there, just fly towards the crowd. Thankfully, nobody in the crowd is killed as far as I can recall, but it is such a good scene. It just works so well because I really like it. It's kind of cheesy, but this whole story is a little bit cheesy, and I love that. I'll get into that in a second. But when he's not saying Merv anymore, he can't hit anything but a 6. And obviously when you throw darts, you throw them in 3s. And every time he does it, the MC says 666, the number of the beast. At least once, it's implied that he's singing it to the tune of Iron Maiden's song. I don't know if that's every time. That would be funny if he was doing that every time, because it gets really annoying on purpose. It's clear that it's just in Terry's head, not the whole thing, just it's itching in his skull, and it's so good. Because this story is if you turned an episode of Only Fools and Horses into a horror film, or a horror story rather, and I genuinely mean that as a compliment. After seeing cuttlefish impregnation and just being devastated by Shanta's story, I needed something like this. It does also have a bit of that Cornetto trilogy quality to it, or something like Dog Soldiers. Crook balances the humour and the horror really nicely here, so neither one overpowered the other. Like, when he's so dead set on getting to the Invictus Cup, it really sounds like something like a national competition, but instead it's just an event at his local leisure centre. And he and his rival, they're both in the bathrooms. I know this is the back rooms then. They're both in the bathrooms and they're like going at each other, just like chatting shit, being all like, fuck you, I'm gonna take you down, oh yeah, you bottled it last time, like really going at each other. They're both acting like they're about to be up against somebody like Phil Taylor or someone like that. Like, I don't know if he's still a darts player, he's just the only one I know by name. But my point is, it is so comical how seriously they take this whole thing. There's like betting scandals going on with this whole thing, for Christ's sake. Genuinely, Terry Slater could be Del Boy and I wouldn't bat an eye until the end of the tournament, but it all just turns into that bloodbath. Also, I was curious to see if Merv Vistow meant anything. If it's an anagram, I can't tell. Merv doesn't seem to be anything, but I did a detect language with Google Translate, and apparently Vistow is Romanian for they were dreaming, so read into that what you will. Next up we go to number 30 with the Vanslow Fox, where Vanslow Lee turns into a fox every Sunday, werefox style, and frankly, he's sick of it. A little while ago, he tried helping a fox on the side of the road, ended up getting bitten, and in that moment there was a soul intertwining with the two of them. One night, while out on his foxy little travels, he ends up getting lured into the woods by our favourite jackdaw, and ends up coming face to face with a tree witch, who tells him that he can become a regular man again if he brings her, quote-unquote, human wine. Now, she's not after a Pinot, but maybe a typo would be good. Ew. And isn't it perfect that Lee works in a hospital? When a large rush of people come in from an incident at a local darts tournament, it becomes the perfect time for him to get a metric ton of blood bags and get them to the witch. He's almost too late, but he does get them to her. But again, the plastic containers that the blood is in are basically like poison to this old witch, and she needs to let him know that that was not the right thing to do. Bear in mind, at this point, he's managed to get the bag to her, but he is in fox form. So what's he supposed to do? Just like carefully tear it open? Like, he's got one human hand and one fox hand when he's in this form. But like, still, she fucks over with him. So she does separate his soul into a fox body and a human body, but it's basically like a Freaky Friday situation, but instead of it being Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis, we get a fox and a man, which is perfect. And yes, as you can see there, the bloodbath Terry's darts tournament does tie into this one here. The way things all slot together just works so nicely. And this one feels like an old dark fairy tale, something that the Brothers Grimm or Perrault would write. There's something strangely comforting about it, that even when you read those old darker fairy tales, there is something about it that I find rather comforting. Even when I read something like The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter, a lot of them have that strange warmth to them. And it does a great job of world building while still telling us a really compelling story. It isn't my favourite in the collection, but it is brilliantly written. I love the folksy feel to it. Like, any that I say, they're not my favourite. This might be my least favourite. It doesn't matter, because they're all fantastic. Speaking of fantastic. Oh, next up we go into number 15 with the Mogon. Geppetto Savini makes creatures and practical effects for movies, especially for horror movies, and a large part of his house is dedicated to his creature workshop. He's also our gnomish oil drum burner we've heard from previously. He's been hired by a film company to make a new devilish beast that's going to serve as a bodysuit. He's given a good amount of free range on this beast, and after doing some historical research and magical research, he creates a beast called the Mogon. It becomes his baby, but he ends up basically getting fired and being told the team is turning towards using full CGI instead. This enrages Geppetto, and he steals his Mogon back. Because the original inspiration of his beast is a devastating warlord devil, he ends up being imbued with the power, and it starts driving Geppetto mad. And he was already kind of mad and angry at everything anyway. He ends up taking the life of a few of the film team, all using the items found in his creature workshop as a way to get back for firing him and using CGI. And I think you can now figure out why he needed the oil drum, because somebody's got to hide the fucking bodies. And towards the end, he does need to evade the police. However, his soul and body end up intertwined with the Mogon, and despite the devastation in his wake, he is basically free. I think this might be my favourite one, to be honest. There's something about it that hooked me in and got me good. I think it's between this, Cuttlefish, and the Darts. And no, the Geppetto name is not lost on me either. It is absolutely used intentionally as a Pinocchio illusion. This is a modern gothic tale done absolutely brilliantly. I mean, old fairy tales are loaded with gothic energy anyway, but the whole playing God aspect of this really hammers it home. It comes back to bite him, as that sort of exploit always does in stories like this, but I love the way Crook plays with that idea. The nastiness and killings in here are done in such a creative manner, and I am obsessed. It is also really clear why Victor thinks this man is in a cult. If I only had the snippets of this man that Victor had, then my mind would probably go to a similar sort of place, because he's seen the oil drum constant burning. He's a weird little grey gnome of a man, and he's seen at some point him putting the Mogon into the back of his van or his car to drive off with it. I would, if I didn't know he was like a creature workshop kind of guy, I would be wondering what the fuck he is doing. I say that as if I didn't help my friend recently get a giant skeleton for their house. But that wasn't a real skeleton with any kind of mystical powers, so, you know. Next we go to number 41, the one closest to the woods, and that is with Dust. Leo and Pippa Harbinger have been married for a few years now, but things have gone kind of stale and it looks like things are petering out. They go to Scotland for an anniversary holiday, but the two of them have very different plans. Pippa brings a heartfelt anniversary card written in her sweet bubbly handwriting, hoping to maybe make amends and give things another go, as it were. Leo, on the other hand, has been having a months-long affair and is planning on getting rid of his wife in a pretty substantial way. They go to a high peak and he sends her tumbling down to her death. He plays the part of the mourning husband perfectly and almost manages to completely get away with it, cashing in on her rather large life insurance policy. But Pippa isn't done with this man yet. From the ashes, she sends the new happy couple a message in the form of a dust storm. And nobody leaves that place alive. And we love a vengeful spirit in this house. Get his ass, babes. This may be my least favourite story in the collection, but it's still a banger. It's just in a fantastic lineup. I love the choking feeling throughout, the absolute desperation, and Pippa getting her own back. I also went on a tangent to find out what a bit of slang might mean in this story, only to find out that everything I was looking up was wrong anyway. And ain't that the way? Like, ain't that the way? I was like, oh, what does this little thing that he's put on? Or is that like a hidden message that I'm looking for? No. It absolutely wasn't. That was just me trying to read too much into things. If I'd have waited a couple of paragraphs, I would have found out what it meant. And there probably is some, like, extra meaning with that, because of what it is alluding to, but I went too far. I wasn't being well behaved, and I needed to just keep reading. And keep reading I did, up to our final story, which is at number 22, Behind the Curtain. Throughout, we get little mentions of the folks in number 22 peeking their head out and watching the goings on the street, especially at night / very early morning. It's a father and daughter who live there, Roy and Lois being in her early 30s and back living with her father after a difficult divorce. One night, she sees a strange, shadowy figure outside of number 27 across the street. It's the only house on the street that looks different to the mock Tudor houses that line the rest of Silverweed Road. She tells her father, and eventually it becomes kind of ritual for the two of them to sit at her window in the early hours, eventually investing in night vision goggles so they can watch these shadowy forms make their way from the house to the woods in the same track every night at slightly different times but very similar. And they go deep into investigation mode. In that investigation, they learn that the area around Silverweed is very much central to the forest that's at the end, and the space where number 27 has existed. No. And the space where number 27 has existed a lot longer than the rest of the street, as it were. Like, when the rest of the street was forest, there was still this space there, and it is the oldest house on the street. We learn more about the witch that we discovered with the fox as well, and how she and the jackdaw seem to be behind everything happening on Silverweed, not just the figures outside number 27, but everything else as well. And Lois eventually makes her way into this strange old house, discovering that the inside is an impossible maze of identical rooms that couldn't possibly fit inside. She does, in a way, make it out, but both her and her father basically end up as food for the forest witch, this giving her the sweet, sweet human wine that she's been needing. And this was a great way to round things up. I kept forgetting to take notes with this one because I was kind of just locked in. Watching the two of them fall into discovery was so engrossing and engaging, I just couldn't get enough. It also managed to bring together so much from what we've seen already so far, wrapping things up without it feeling like Crook was trying too hard to bring things together, as I've seen previously. I think about something like Plain Bad Heroines. There's nothing like that where it's suddenly we have a bunch of new things introduced. It is him using everything we've learned so far and putting it together in one place. The jackdaw plays a huge role in this, but we also come back to the witch with her human wine. We learned that this house appears different from the rest of the street all the way back in the pool, and that water also in a way makes a reappearance while Lois is exploring the house. It feels like when you're completing something like a crossword and each clue helps you answer more than just the one line you're originally filling out. It's fantastic. This book just did not disappoint. And, like, yeah, there were a couple of details I wasn't a fan of, or there were a couple of mistakes, I would say, but frankly, they're so unimportant to my overall enjoyment of this book. I didn't know what to expect going in, and I couldn't be happier. Hopefully, we can carry that forward to next week, where we'll be looking at Cuckoo by Gretchen Falcon Martin, which is a horror about a gay conversion camp. Really looking forward to that. To make sure you can feast your eyes on that, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, and feel free to ring that notification bell. All the cringe shit I'm supposed to ask you to do in my videos. But most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take good care of yourself. Right.